Okay.
Okay, Erev Tov, everyone. So we find ourselves at the beginning of a new cycle, reading the Torah, already in Parashat Noach. But it's a good opportunity to talk once again about Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum, the obligation of reading the Parasha twice every week together with the Targum. The truth is, you look at what the Achronim say about this, and they have a lot to say about this mitzvah, about this chiyuv. There's 2 points that everybody agrees on. The 2 points that everybody agrees on is that A, it's a chiyuv, and B, they don't know why not everybody does it. But beyond that, what is the Targum? Why do we do it? How do we do it? How many times? When do you say it? When can you start? When can you finish? Does it all have to be in one go, pasuk by pasuk? About all of that, we find disagreement. But everybody agrees that there is a chiyuv. So let's talk about it a little bit. Look at some very interesting discussions brought in Poskei Zmanenu as well, related to Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum. So the first thing is, this is based on a Gemara Brachot, Tafchet, where the Gemara says, "Le'olam yashlim adam parshotav im hatzibur," that a person should always should read the parshiot, should prepare the parshiot together with the tzibur, meaning that parsha which the tzibur is reading every week, so a person, individual, has an obligation to read as well. There is an opinion, there's one opinion in the Rishonim, that this is talking about a person who's not going to be able to come to shul, or if the shul is not coming together, then an individual would have to read in order to make up those parshiot. But that is a minority opinion, that is a singular minority opinion. Just about all the Rishonim understand not like that. That even though, and this is the language you find in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, that even though one is going to hear the Kriyat Torah in shul, nonetheless there's a separate obligation to prepare the parsha, a separate obligation of Shnai Mikra. This is, by the way, the Gemara says that somebody who does this will have their marichin lo yamavu shnotav. They'll have a long life. So everybody's always looking for skulot or different things. So this is a very, very good skula, besides the fact that it's a chiyuv. So the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Pei, an entire siman dedicated to the mitzvah of Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum, says, "Afal pi shadam shomea kol haTorah kula kol Shabbat b'tzibur." Even though you hear the entire Torah every week, you don't hear the entire Torah every week. You hear the parsha every week, but all through the year you hear the entire Torah. Chayav likrot latzmo b'kol shavua. Nonetheless, one needs to individually, for oneself, read that parsha each week. Shnai Mikra, meaning reading the Psukim themselves twice, and Targum, translation once as well. Now, what is Targum? It says, "Afilu atarot v'divon," meaning there are certain words, certain phrases, certain Psukim which have no Targum, have no translation. Nonetheless, those are included as well. So Targum over here refers to Targum Onkelos. And Targum Onkelos, we know, is not just a Targum, not just a translation, but it's also a perush, right? Sometimes Onkelos changes the word, sometimes he adds things in, right? There are some versions, it's very nice, because it's a little bit difficult nowadays to follow along. Most people don't really understand the Aramaic, the Targum Onkelos. But there are some versions you can get where every time when Onkelos changes the words, it's in bold, or it's highlighted, or it's in a different color, and it's very easy to follow along. There are those who say, and Shulchan Aruch says immediately, the next if it says, Perush Rashi, Chashuv K'mo Targum. If you learn together with Rashi's Perush, the Targum as well. That is based on the Rosh who says that the whole point of reading Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum, once upon a time, you would read the Targum, you'd read the Aramaic, that would help you to understand it. If you don't understand the Targum, so we'll see, there are some poskim who say, nonetheless, there is still value in reading it. But the idea is to understand what's being written, and therefore you have a parish of Rashi that is agreed that is sufficient as well. That's the Rosh. By the way, Rashi is not clear. There are those who want to say that according to Rashi, if you do Shnai Mikra with Rashi, you haven't fulfilled the obligation. But according to the Rosh, if you do it with Rashi, you have fulfilled the obligation. The Shulchan Aruch actually says, Yerei Shamayim Mikra Targum v'gam Perush Rashi. Says if you're really Yerei Shamayim, you'll do both. Because there's a value in the Targum and there's a value in Rashi in terms of understanding. The poskim nowadays say, at the end of the day, the bottom line, everybody points out, as I said, that this is a chiyuv, and there is a certain rifyon, right? There's a certain weakness in terms of not everybody fulfills this chiyuv, and therefore the poskim say, if reading it every week, you're going to have to do it with Targum and with Rashi, and that's going to put you off, right? You're going to be able to do it just doing Rashi or just doing Targum, so do that. Whatever works, so long as the main thing is to fulfill the mitzvah first, and then we'll talk about all the other details. So the Igrot Moshe has an interesting tshuva of Moshe Feinstein. He was asked People are always looking for exemption. People are always looking for heter, for ways out. So the question was, if you are a Bachur Yeshiva or you're a Talmid Chacham, somebody you're learning all day, right? Torah Manuto. Not talking about other things that Bachur Yeshiva should or shouldn't be doing. It's sensitive at the moment. We're not talking about that. But the question here was asked, if somebody's learning all day, right, his time, he's not wasting his time. He's not a butlan. From the morning to the evening, he's learning his Gemara, whatever it is. He says, I don't have time for Shnai Mikra. Right? Is that okay? Is that an exemption? So Rav Moshe Feinstein wasn't so enamored with the question. I'll read you his answer. He says, Pashut ubarur. He says it's simple and it's obvious. Just as a person is not exempt from any other mitzvah d'Rabbanan, he says, I learned Torah, therefore I don't have to fulfill the mitzvah. He says, why would you think that the mitzvah of Shnai Mikra is any different? He says to the contrary. The Gemara tells us, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there's nobody on this level today. Well, the phrase is used colloquially in other contexts. There's nobody on this level today. Why Rabbi Shimon, who the Gemara says there, Torato Manuto, literally doesn't waste a moment, doesn't waste a second. He's learning Torah all day. He was patur from Tefillah, but he was not patur from Kriyat Shema, which is an obligation to writing. So says Rav Moshe Feinstein, even somebody like Rashbi, who's Torato Manuto, Shayu Pturim Mitfilah Drabanan, who would have been exempt from Tfilah Drabanan, nonetheless, he says, "Ayu chayavin bekrata parasha shnai mikra ve'echad targum." Somewhere in the cave, Rashi was doing shnai mikra ve'echad targum. Right? That's what comes out of this. He says because this is comes out of this. Aside from the answer he's giving to a specific question, we understand the fundamental. According to Rav Moshe Feinstein, the yesod, the foundation of this mitzvah is that it's to do with limud, that it's to do with learning, and therefore it makes more sense. I have to understand what it is I'm learning. He says shnai mikra is part of the mitzvah of limud Torah, and therefore. גם זהו לימוד תורה, ובחיוב לימוד תורה העיקר חיוב לימוד גם מקרא. The Gemara in Kiddushin tells us there are different parts of Torah. The person has an obligation. The Gemara in Kiddushin says that a person needs to divide their time that they learn into three. Right? Shlish Mikra, Shlish Mishnah, Shlish Talmud. That is what the Gemara says in Kiddushin. Nobody does this today. Why is that? So the Rishonim explain. According to Tosfot says that really when you learn Talmud Bavli, you fulfill your obligation. Why? Because it's got a bit of everything inside. It's got psukim, it's got mishnah, it's got mara, that's one of the reasons why it's called bavli, because it's called balut, right? Everything is mixed up in it. That's what Tosfot says. Rambam says that when we say you have to spend a third mikra, a third mishnah, a third Talmud, he says that's only at the beginning when you start learning. He says, but once you've already gone through and you've become proficient, then you don't have to spend as much time learning Tanakh. So says the Rambam. So here, because Moshe says like this. He says, even though we have, when it comes to the mitzvah of limud Torah, part of the mitzvah of limud Torah is limud mikra. So you have to learn Chumash. And he says, even though Tosfot says the limud Talmud Bavli yotzei gam yedei mikra, that by learning Gemara you fulfill this obligation as well. Mishum sheblula gam b'mikra, it includes Tukim, it includes parts of Tanakh. And even according to the Rambam, he says, Zelachar shetvah yodei etev Torah shebichtav. Once you've become proficient in Tanakh, so you don't have to learn Torah Shebichtav every day. Like Gemara, you have to learn every day, but that you don't have to learn every day. But nonetheless, you still have to learn sometimes. He says, "Kol sheken she'eno tzarech lashlish tzmano, mikom makom mechuyav gam leRambam lemod be'ez zman Torah Shebichtav." He says, even according to the Rambam, you believe it or not, you have to learn Torah Shebichtav as well. So therefore, he says, no one's exempt from this. Im ken baruch shekriyat shnai mikra ve'echad targum. He says this is part of one's obligation every week of learning Torah, which applies to everybody. You should learn other things as well. He says, but you cannot exempt yourself with the claim that I'm learning other things and therefore I don't have to learn Shnai Mikra. He says, Ben bichtav, ben bal peh. Levad mitzvah nosefet shechivu chachamim, and then he concludes, Mimele ein ptor, there is no exemption. Af la'elu shetoratan umanatan karashbi v'chaberav, even as we said, those like Rabbi Shimon. And now he concludes, he says, Beprat ledoreinu, she'ein anu yocholin lomar she'anu bekiyin b'mikra. Moshe Feinstein ends off with a little bit of Musar. He says, nowadays, you can say they know, you know all of Chumash, you know all of Tanakh, about Peh. He says that nowadays we aren't proficient, and therefore we need to be involved in this every week. Okay? But what you see from here, again, what comes out very, very strongly from that tshuva, is that part of the reason for the mitzvah is to do with learning Torah. This is part of limud. And therefore, there's no really limud if you don't understand. So if a person is going through Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum and he's reading Onkelos and it's Aramaic, but it may as well be Greek, right? According to that approach, you haven't really done anything. According to that approach, it's better to learn with Rashi, to learn with the Perush, to learn something that you understand. Another contemporary posek who goes in a very similar direction is Rosh Sternbuch. Rosh Sternbuch in his Shavot V'Anagot, also here the question is printed as this: Chovat limud Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum. It's not really a question, but it says the obligation of Shnai Mikra. And he goes through and he discusses. He quotes the Gemara, he quotes the Shulchan Aruch, as we've seen, and he also writes how one has to be very, very careful with this mitzvah, apparently, especially nowadays when there's a certain laxity about it. And so two points which he raises here. One is he says he was asked the following question. I assume this was in South Africa by a Baal Tshuva. He says Baal Tshuva Echad Kan shemitzvato lekol Shnai Mikra v'yikra haTargum ha'Angli. He wants to know, can he read the Targum, not Rashi, not Onkelos, but English, the art scroll, let's say, right? Would he fulfill that? So he says Kevan she'eno mevin klal Rashi v'Targum. So I'll just tell you, just by way of introduction, again, these poskim say lean more towards the side that says we emphasize the fact of learning, the fact of understanding, and that's why we do Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum. There are poskim. We saw the Shulchan Aruch who said it's not so clear. Should you do Rashi? Should you do Onkelos? Maybe you should do both. What is the side to say that you should do Onkelos even if you don't understand it? Rav Ovadia writes, based on Kabbalah and based on many sources in that direction, say better to do Onkelos, better to do both. But they say better to do with Onkelos even if you don't understand. Why? And they write because there's a tradition that this was the Perush of Onkelos was given at Sinai. It's not just about learning. It's not just about necessarily just about understanding, but there's something here about recreating the experience of receiving the Torah the way that it was given at Sinai. So there are those who go in this direction, those who go in that direction. As I said, nowadays, whatever's going to work for a person, that's probably the best. But even those who say do Rashi, it's not just any translation, it's not just any Perush. Say it's a translation, Perush of Rashi. Rashi is based on Chazal. Rashi brings many midrashim. We know that it certainly follows the tradition of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So the question is, you have just a different translation, a modern translation, English translation. Can you rely on that? So he says, yeah. He says that there is an advantage in learning the Targum, even if you don't understand it, because it was given from Sinai. But that's if you understand a little bit. What if you don't understand at all? So he says at the end, like She'eno mevin klal, mutav she'yikra perush Rashi or Targum l'lashon laz. He says you can use Rashi or you can use maybe a translation, I think, of Rashi. He says you have to be very, very careful which translation you use. You could use a different translation, but you have to make sure that it's faithful to Torah, to the Torah Sheba'al Peh, to the Farshim. There are all sorts of translations and things out there which may not exactly fit into this category. Okay, more to talk about. We didn't talk about the idea of chinuch, etc. Maybe we'll get to that tomorrow.
Where is the basis for this? Is there a Muslim?
So at the beginning, it's the Gemara. It's the Gemara in Brachot Avchet. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash Omer Sakar Shpach Zakot Yisrael V'Chach B'Alem Zol Mitzvot Shnei Madonai Chavetz Tzman Tzivko Yagdir Torah V'Yadir.